If you had told me on the morning of my wedding that my father, who vanished 15 years ago without a word, would walk through the reception doors holding a gift, I would have laughed and called you insane. Because for most of my life, I believed he was either dead or didn't care enough to show up. But he did show up. And the gift he brought? It changed everything I thought I knew about who he was and who I was. But let me start from the beginning. I was 11 when my dad disappeared. One day he was packing my lunch and cracking jokes in the kitchen. The next he was gone. No goodbye. No note. Not even a phone call. My mom told everyone he had mental health struggles and needed space. But the way she said it made me feel like there was more to it, like she knew something but didn't want to say. As a kid, you don't know how to process that kind of absence. I waited for him for weeks. I sat by the window hoping his car would pull up. I left drawings for him in the mailbox. But he never came back. Eventually, I stopped asking. I buried the questions. My mom raised me the best she could. Strong woman, sharp tongue, big heart, but there were gaps she couldn't fill. I remember watching other kids get picked up by their dads and feeling this ache that I couldn't explain, like I had a phantom limb. As I got older, I built up walls, told myself I didn't care, told people he was probably dead just so I wouldn't have to explain the not knowing. But deep down, there was always this feeling, a hum, a whisper, like I wasn't finished with that chapter. Fast forward to the year I met Emily, my fiancée. She was light, gentle in ways I didn't know how to be. She asked me once about my dad, and I just said, he left. She didn't push. She just held my hand. When we got engaged, we started planning a small, intimate wedding in my hometown. My mom was thrilled, a little too thrilled. I caught her once holding an old photo of him, and when she noticed me watching, she shoved it back in the drawer. I didn't ask. Maybe I should have. The morning of the wedding felt normal. Nervous butterflies, last-minute bow tie fixing, my best friend giving me terrible advice. But something in the air felt off, like a low hum in my chest again. I ignored it, told myself this was just what weddings felt like. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily looked unreal walking down the aisle. I actually forgot to breathe. When we kissed and the crowd clapped, I thought, this is it. This is what peace feels like. But peace doesn't last long in my life. We walked into the reception, hand in hand, smiles wide, music playing. We were being introduced as husband and wife when the music stuttered and stopped. At first, I thought it was a technical glitch. Then I turned toward the entrance and my entire body locked. Standing in the doorway was a man. Slim build, gray at the temples, wearing a navy blue blazer I recognized from an old photo, buried in our garage. He looked like someone who didn't belong until I looked at his eyes. My father's eyes. The same tired, ocean blue stare I inherited. For a moment, the world went quiet, like time held its breath. My mom gasped behind me. Emily whispered, "Is that?" And I just nodded, unable to speak. He walked slowly, like he was unsure if his legs would hold. In his hands, he carried a wooden box, polished but worn at the edges. As he got closer, I noticed his hands were shaking. I didn't know if it was nerves, or age, or both. He stopped a few feet in front of me. The room was dead silent. He looked at me and said, "I didn't want to ruin your day." But I couldn't miss it. My fists clenched without me realizing. My voice came out sharper than I intended. 15 years and you picked today to show up? He lowered his eyes. I deserve that. I deserve worse. Then he looked up and added, "But before you decide what to do with me, I need you to open this." He extended the box. My first instinct was to turn away, but something about the way he held it like it weighed more than it should made me take it. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just stared at it. The wood was smooth. There were initials carved into the side mine. My knees felt weak. And right then, I realized something that shook me more than seeing him again. Whatever was inside this box, it wasn't just a gift. It was a story, a confession, or maybe a second chance. I looked at Emily. She gave a small nod, and slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside the box was a single manila envelope, thick, sealed, and slightly worn. My fingers hesitated before pulling it out. On the front, written in a handwriting I vaguely remembered from old birthday cards, were the words, "For when you're strong enough to know the truth." My heart skipped. I glanced up at him. He didn't say a word, just nodded slowly, eyes glistening like he'd waited years for this moment. I took a deep breath and tore it open. Inside were photos, letters, and a folded document that looked official. I pulled out the top letter. It was dated nearly 15 years ago. The words at the top made me freeze. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home." My stomach dropped. The letter continued, and as I read, my world tilted. He wrote about how he had been approached by federal agents investigating a massive fraud ring. One of his old business partners was laundering money through the company and using him as the fall guy. Dad said he got a tip the night before he disappeared that he'd either be arrested or killed if he stayed. He had two choices: run and protect his family from being dragged into the mess, or stay and lose everything, including us. So he disappeared, went underground, changed his name, lived off the grid. The photos inside the envelope showed him working odd jobs in places I'd never heard of: gas stations, fishing boats, a small bookstore. In one picture, he looked gaunt but peaceful, standing in front of a cabin in the woods. I kept flipping through letters he had written over the years but never sent. There were dozens sewn for every birthday, every Christmas, even a few for random Tuesdays when he said he missed me most. He talked about the way I used to hold his finger when I was a baby, the time I lost my first tooth and made him promise I'd still be cute. He remembered it all, every little thing. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw a drop land on one of the letters. My hands were shaking. I couldn't speak. My dad stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for the right time. I wanted to come back sooner, but it was still too dangerous. Then I saw your wedding announcement in an old paper, and I knew I had to risk it." I looked up at him. "Why didn't you send the letters?" He sighed. "Because I didn't want to make it worse. I figured silence was less cruel than giving you hope I couldn't promise." My mom suddenly stepped forward. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. "You should have told me," she said. "You should have trusted me." He looked at her like a man who had rehearsed this moment in his head 1,000 times. "I didn't want them to come after you, too." Emily squeezed my hand, grounding me. I was still trying to process it all. The man I had hated, mourned, resented, had been living in hiding to protect us. But I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? Grief all over again? I looked down at the last thing in the envelope, a legal document. It was a notarized statement, dated just a month ago. My dad had legally transferred ownership of the cabin in the mountains to me. It came with a small trust account he'd saved over the years, dollar by dollar, building something for me. "It's not much," he said, "but it's everything I have left." I stood there in the middle of my wedding reception, holding the weight of 15 years. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel empty. I felt full, overwhelmed, but full. I didn't say anything. I just stepped forward and hugged him. And for a few seconds, I was 11 again, holding on to the father I thought I'd lost forever. The crowd around us didn't know what to do. Some people were crying, some awkwardly clapping, others just stunned, but I didn't care. The man who vanished without a trace was standing in front of me, broken but real. And now, the real question was, what came next? We didn't talk much for the rest of that night. He stayed on the edge of the crowd, mostly in silence, letting the evening continue without making it about himself. I watched him from across the room, sipping water, answering the occasional question from an old family friend, but mostly just being still. And I wondered how many times he had imagined this moment, what it must have felt like to finally step into the light after hiding for so long. After the reception, he came up to me as Emily and I were about to leave. He looked uncertain, nervous again. "I know I've said too little, too late," he whispered, "but I just wanted to say, you turned out better than I ever could have dreamed." I nodded, too tired to fake a smile. "You missed a lot," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "and I'll never ask you to forgive me for that. I just wanted to give you the truth, before it was too late." We shook hands. That was all I had in me at the time. A hug felt too much. A goodbye too final. I told him we'd talk, that I needed time. And then he left, just as quietly as he had appeared. Emily and I drove off into our new life together, both of us quiet for most of the ride. She finally spoke. "That box changed everything, didn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah. And I don't know how to feel about that yet." The days after were messy, emotionally. My mom wouldn't talk about it much, said she was still processing. She admitted, reluctantly, that she had received a letter from him a few months after he left, asking her to pretend he was dead for my safety. She did it because she believed him, but it destroyed her too. For the first time, I saw my mother, not as just my mother, but as a woman who had spent 15 years carrying a secret she couldn't share. I started reading the rest of the letters in the box, one by one. Some were angry. Some were heartbreaking. Some felt like prayers whispered in the dark. He wrote to me about songs he heard that made him think of me, dreams he had where I was 10 again, and we were fishing. He even wrote letters to the version of me he never met, teenage me, college me, the me walking down the aisle. It was the strangest feeling, holding a lifetime of love from someone I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. And slowly, I started to soften. I called him, then met him again. I started to soften. Is a C0 that Tim, as in class, enduretta sir, enduro. I was half Tim of, is in class, I was an Eimire, ender. We started small coffee, walks, awkward silences. I still didn't know how to introduce him. This is my dad. Felt too simple. This is the man who vanished and came back with a story too wild to believe. Felt too complicated. But over time, it didn't matter. We began again not from where we left off, but from where we were. He came to visit the cabin he'd left me, showed me where he used to sit in the mornings, where he'd carved my initials into the tree before he ever dared send me anything. And it hit me that maybe he never really left me. He just didn't know how to stay. One day, about a year later, we were standing on the porch of that cabin. The leaves were turning orange and gold. He handed me something small, almost shyly. "I was going to give this to you at the wedding too," he said. "But I figured the box was enough for one day." It was a key. I looked at him. "To what?" He smiled, almost sheepish. "To a safe deposit box in Portland. I left one more thing there, something I didn't want to lose." A few weeks later, I went, opened it. Inside was a single object, an old cassette tape, labeled, in that same handwriting, "For when you have a son of your own." I haven't listened to it yet. I don't have kids, but I keep it in my desk drawer. Because maybe one day, I will. And maybe that day, I'll finally be ready to hear the last part of his story. Maybe I'll never fully understand why he left or why it took him 15 years to come back. But I do know this. He didn't return empty-handed. He came back with truth, with proof, with a kind of love that had been buried but never died. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.